This is a Fox News alert. A professional wrestler and his family have been found dead inside their home. At about 2:30 p.m. today, 40-year-old Chris Benoit was found in his suburban Atlanta house along with his wife and young son. Benoit, known as the Rabid Wolverine, was a former world heavyweight champion and held several tag team titles over his career. The WWE website released a statement saying, in part, Chris was beloved among his fellow superstars and was a favorite among WWE fans for his unbelievable athleticism and wrestling ability. He always took great pride in his performance and always showed respect for the business he loved, for his peers, and towards his fans. This is a terrible tragedy and an unbearable loss. Now, tonight, the Associated Press is reporting the deaths are being investigated as homicides. We will continue to keep you updated.
Another very strange case, this one out of Atlanta. He was set to compete Sunday, but wrestler Chris Benoit canceled at the last minute. Monday, the star wrestler, his wife, and young son were found dead in their home. Police call it a murder-suicide and describing the details of their deaths as bizarre. Jonathan Seri is following the story from Atlanta. Jonathan?
John, this is a bizarre case indeed. As we speak, the GBI, or Georgia Bureau of Investigation, is performing autopsies and toxicology tests on the 3 victims. Still waiting for those results, but investigators are handling this case as if it were a murder-suicide. That's what they believe based on their initial investigation of the crime scene in suburban Atlanta. Wrestling icon Chris Benoit had canceled a pay-per-view appearance at Sunday's Vengeance event in Houston, citing personal reasons. World Wrestling Entertainment says it asked authorities to check on Benoit and his family after friends said the wrestler had sent them strange text messages. On Monday, authorities went out to the Benoit's gated home in suburban Atlanta. There they found the bodies of the wrestler, his wife Nancy, and their 7-year-old son Daniel in 3 separate rooms.
Mr. Benoit was located in a weight room, and the minor child was located upstairs in a bedroom. Investigators say that a gun was not used during these crimes. They wouldn't specify exactly what led to the deaths of these 3 Benoit family members. However, the website TMZ.com is quoting several Atlanta-based law enforcement sources saying that Benoit may have strangled his wife on Saturday and then smothered his son in his bed a day later before finally hanging himself Monday in that weight room. John, back to you.
Jonathan Seri from Atlanta. Thank you.
The wrestling world in shock today. Former champion Chris Benoit found dead in his Atlanta home along with his wife and young son. Police now treating the discovery as a double murder-suicide. World Wrestling Entertainment says Benoit failed to show for 2 live events over the weekend, and apparently at least 1 suspicious text message sent to friends prompted wrestling officials to send police to his house. On the phone now, staff writer for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Saeed Ahmed. And Saeed, what do you know about this suspicious text message?
Well, the Sheriff's Department will only confirm that he sent at least 1 text message sometime around 4:30 a.m. Saturday. And I know that the WWE is saying that he sent several others, which is what prompted them to contact the Sheriff's Office to go do a welfare check at the house. But the other thing that they are saying now is that he allegedly killed the wife and child sometime over the weekend and then took his life on Monday.
But go back real quickly if you can for this text message. It's got to be at least very alarming or very strange for them to say you need to go to this house and check it out.
Yes, I think what the WWE is saying is that he sent several of these, and they would only characterize it as being curious. And the Sheriff's Office, they aren't disclosing the content of the 1 text message that they have confirmed. They won't say anything beyond the fact that there was one that was sent from his cell phone.
You talked about maybe killing his wife and child over the weekend. Are you kind of getting some kind of a timeline on this, Saeed, as far as when the text messages went out and when these murders might have happened and then when ultimately Benoit finally killed himself?
No, not right now. I think they are conducting the autopsies are supposed to have started at 10 a.m.
At least one of them is, yes.
Yes, and so we won't be finding, I mean, if they are pretty good at letting us know. The district attorney has been doing a pretty good job of that. Then we probably will know a little bit more later on in the day.
So, yeah, we know that Chris Benoit also has an ex-wife and other kids, apparently living up in Canada. Do you know from his background, is there violence in there, any kind of domestic violence at all?
You know, I talked last night when we were reporting on this story. Obviously, we got tons and tons of emails from not just fans, but other people who maintain wrestling websites. And all of them said the same thing, that they hadn't heard of any sort of turmoil, marital turmoil between them. But, you know, these are kind of things that sometimes don't come to the surface right away. But the neighbors said that they have lived there since last summer, and they've never seen a police car come to the house.
And as far as you know, has anybody contacted the former wife and that family to find out if this would be absolutely out of character for him to show any kind of violent tendencies?
We tried getting in touch with them last night. We didn't have much luck, and we have other reporters working on it today. I'm sure we'll be looking into that angle.
What's the big piece of news you're looking for as the hours and days progress in this case, Saeed?
Well, for right now, the most important thing that we are very curious about is the cause of the murder-suicide. You know, the sheriff's office is saying that the instruments of death were located inside the house, and the DA has said that once the details come out, it'll prove to be very bizarre. Those were his words. And they also said that there was no gun involved, so we are left wondering, how did this happen? I mean, were they stabbed? Were they poisoned? Because
when we hear instruments of death, I mean, the first thing that comes to your mind is a very violent scenario. Agreed?
Yes. It is, but you know, but then again, it is police talk, and you know, without them being too specific, they might just say instruments to refer to anything.
Saeed Ahmed, Saeed, we'll get back to you, I'm sure, as the story develops. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Take care.
Professional wrestler Chris Benoit. Police say Benoit strangled his wife and suffocated his 7-year-old son. The family is seen here in this video following a wrestling event. Benoit then placed a Bible next to their bodies before hanging himself. It's believed Benoit killed himself a day after the murders of his wife and son. Authorities say they also found anabolic steroids in Benoit's Georgia home. Those drugs can cause paranoia and sudden outbursts.
Now, police in suburban Atlanta are investigating what appears to be a murder-suicide involving WWE wrestler Chris Benoit. The 40-year-old, his wife, and 7-year-old son were found dead in their home Monday afternoon. Benoit was a veteran of the wrestling ring, widely considered to be the top performer in his craft. His wife, Nancy, had also spent time in the wrestling business. The former world heavyweight champion was slated to perform at a WWE pay-per-view event on Sunday, but viewers were told he was home for personal reasons. Fights at soccer matches aren't exactly
blogging are going to add to that debate. Meanwhile, welcome back. Thanks so much for being with us on June 26th. It's a Tuesday. I'm Kieran Chetri along with John Roberts. And, you know, we woke up to the shocking news of death in the world of professional wrestling. A very popular guy by the name of Chris Benoit, a champion wrestler, found dead along with his wife and son. All the blogs are buzzing about it this morning. What happened in that home and what to make of reports that he may have sent text messages during the weekend to other staffers and people at the World Wrestling Enterprise, and whether or not that prompted calls to authorities, and eventually what they found was what they believe could be a double murder-suicide crime scene. So we're going to follow that.
All very mysterious. Also, remember the YouTube cell phone guy posted his number, said, hey, if you're lonely, you want to talk, give me a call. Thousands of people called him, including one special caller. We'll have an update on that story for you.
Live from Edmonton, CTV News with Aaron Isfeld and Daryl McIntyre.
Good evening. Some shocking news tonight involving a hometown hero. This for Edmonton wrestling fans.
Former pro wrestling champ Chris Benoit and his family have been reportedly found dead in their Atlanta home. Our Des Malenka is following the story and joins us live in the studio with more on this tonight.
Aaron, just a short time ago, the news came across the World Wrestling Entertainment website. Details surrounding their deaths have not been released. We have talked with his mother, Margaret, here in the Edmonton area. Benoit, his wife, and little boy had all been found dead. We caught up with the Edmonton wrestler when he came home for a sold-out televised event in 2002 called Monday Night Raw. However, he wasn't able to compete because of an injury. 2 years later, Benoit was back home for a special event. It was April 15, 2004, when the city declared it Chris Benoit Day. A few days later, he wrestled at Rexall Place. News of the wrestler's death has been a shock and surprise to many faithful fans.
Definitely a sad day for wrestling and for Edmonton, too, a local guy. He's been one of my favorites, actually, for a long time with the local connection, but I like what he does in the ring, too.
Born in Montreal, Benoit grew up in the Edmonton area and graduated from Archbishop O'Leary in 1985. He was supposed to take part in a pay-per-view event last night, but didn't compete because of personal reasons.
Yes, there's been a lot of speculation surrounding his death. And if this was any other walk of life, some people might not be questioning whether these reports are true or not.
Exactly. News of the deaths did come at a time in the WWE where there's a storyline of a person being killed. It appears, though, when we talked to Benoit's mother on the phone, it appeared obvious that this was not a hoax. Chris Benoit was 40 years old.
Thank you, Des.
Thank you.
A Fox News alert, and the Associated Press is now echoing the report that we just got from our Jonathan Seri in Atlanta. Law enforcement officials who are close to the investigation say that pro wrestler Chris Benoit strangled his wife, smothered his 7-year-old son, and then hanged himself in the weight room of his suburban Atlanta mansion. 3 deaths over the weekend. They were just discovered yesterday. It's believed that he killed his wife and son sometime over the weekend and then waited until yesterday to hang himself. That, according to law enforcement officials close to the investigation. More details as they become available.
Family over the weekend. Authorities say Chris Benoit strangled his wife and suffocated his son, then hanged himself. Eyewitness News reporter Robert Olguin.
Much happier times back in 2004. Chris Benoit, his wife and son celebrating inside the ring. But inside his house over the weekend, authorities in Georgia say Benoit orchestrated a horrifying murder-suicide. It started Friday when investigators say Benoit strangled his 43-year-old wife.
The wife was bound on her feet and I think also on her wrists. There was some blood under her head.
His 7-year-old boy was found inside his bedroom. Police say he was suffocated sometime late Saturday or Sunday. Investigators say Benoit left a Bible next to his victims' bodies. Then on Monday, after making disturbing phone calls to family and friends, authorities say Benoit hanged himself using the cables on a weightlifting machine.
It struck me as somewhat bizarre that perhaps he would even be in the home with their deceased bodies for some length of time.
Benoit's wife had filed a restraining order against him in 2003, but then had it dismissed. Toxicology reports are being performed to determine if the steroids or medications played any part in Benoit's behavior, but the results won't be available for several more weeks. Robert Olguin, ABC 7 Eyewitness News. Mark, back to you.
Go.
What they're trying to determine now is what role, if any, did his use of steroids that is, play in the tragedy.
Anytime Chris Benoit went to the ring, he gave it 120%.
Last night, fans saw this hastily produced 3-hour tribute to Chris Benoit on Monday Night Raw.
WWE superstar Chris Benoit, his wife Nancy, and their son Daniel are dead.
But police say the man they praised was a killer.
We're now looking at this case and ruling it as a double homicide, suicide.
What would the WE say on tonight's program?
There will be no mention of Mr. Benoit's name tonight.
And with that, the show went on as if nothing had happened. But police say what happened in this suburban Atlanta home was much more than just an incident. This is video of Benoit performing in the ring. And this is his wife.
Right here.
And their 7-year-old son. Investigators say Benoit tied up his wife Nancy and strangled her to death. Then he suffocated his son Daniel. Sometime later, they say, Benoit hung himself in the basement.
There was a Bible placed at beside the body of each of the victims, and I thought that was somewhat bizarre.
Jimmy Baswell was Chris Benoit's driver.
I just cannot see this. He carried his son on a pedestal. He loved that boy. You can watch any pay-per-view event. Anytime he win a match, he had his son in the ring with him. And I just cannot fathom the idea that he done anything to this family.
Toxicology tests are now being done to determine what, if any, drugs were in Benoit's system when he died.
Some disturbing new details tonight of the apparent double murder-suicide at pro wrestler Chris Benoit's Georgia home. Cops saying in a press conference just a couple of hours ago that they found the wrestler hanging by a pulley on some exercise equipment at his home gym. They also found Bibles placed beside the bodies of his wife and his 7-year-old son. They were apparently killed in separate rooms. There were prescription steroids also found in the home. The toxicology results, they're not going to be back for a few weeks, so we don't actually know the connection there yet, but a lot of people looking at those steroids. Prime News correspondent Rochelle Carey joining us from our newsroom studio. She's been following this very closely all day and has more of a picture for us, Rochelle, on just who this guy is, especially for folks who aren't familiar with professional wrestling. Who is Chris Benoit?
Well, Erica, Benoit had an intense on-stage persona. He was nicknamed the Rabid Wolverine, the Canadian Crippler. But what we have found is that family and friends describe him as quiet, soft-spoken. They say his family had a very low-key lifestyle. You might not expect that if you saw him performing. Benoit's driver, Jimmy Baswell, and his wife, Wanda, knew the family. They say they cannot believe this has happened.
He carried his son on a pedestal. He loved that boy. You can watch any pay-per-view event. Anytime he win a match, he had his son in the ring with him. And I just cannot fathom the idea that he done anything to this family.
He was the politest person I've ever met. I mean, it was always yes ma'am, no ma'am. I mean, he wasn't rude to anybody. He was always talking about his kids and when they were coming to visit and what they were going to do.
Did you ever seem like he had a temper?
No, never.
Some more background now on Benoit. He was born in Montreal. He started his wrestling career back in Canada more than 2 decades ago. He had 2 children from a previous relationship, and those children do still live in Canada. Erica.
And Rochelle, as I understand it, he wasn't the only one, though, involved in wrestling. Both he and his wife had a pretty strong connection to this.
Absolutely. This is all about his family. Benoit's wife, Nancy, was also involved in pro wrestling. She actually managed several wrestlers, and she went by the stage name Woman. The couple actually met when her former husband drew up a script that had put the two of them in a relationship, and that's how they met.
I know it's just a lot of shock across the wrestling world from both fans and those involved in it. Are the WWE or CEO Vince McMahon speaking out, especially as more details emerge?
Absolutely. If you go to their website right now, on their website, this is what it says. It says Chris was beloved among his fellow superstars and was as well among WWE fans. This is an unbearable loss. And in fact, it was a WWE official that called police after Benoit missed 2 events that he was supposed to be at over the weekend in Texas. And last night, the WWE aired a 3-hour tribute to Benoit instead of the usual Monday Night Raw. So he was very, very important to them, Erica.
He was important. Just so many questions tonight, though. Such a disturbing story and such a terrible and tragic ending. Rochelle, thanks.
We will begin with a crime that has rocked the wrestling world. Police say pro wrestler Chris Benoit killed himself after murdering his wife and young son. And now World Wrestling Entertainment officials have revealed just what Benoit had to say to them after he took his family's lives. The story now from NBC's Ron Mott.
In the ring, it was a family affair. Chris Benoit, his wife and manager Nancy, nicknamed Woman, and their 7-year-old son Daniel. But that picture of bliss turned deadly over several days last weekend at their suburban Atlanta home.
Mr. Benoit, possibly Friday, had murdered his wife by asphyxiation. Sometime shortly after that, on into the early part of the weekend, the same for his son Daniel.
The 7-year-old was found suffocated in his bed. Police say at least a day after the carnage began, Benoit hanged himself in the basement.
There was a Bible placed at beside the body of each of the victims, and I thought
that was somewhat bizarre.
According to the WWE, Benoit called co-workers 5 different times on Saturday, most likely after the murders, explaining why he was not in Texas on the wrestling tour. First, he said he was tired and had overslept, but he ended the phone call by saying, "I love you," which the co-worker thought was out of context. He told another co-worker his wife and son had food poisoning and were throwing up blood. He needed to take them to the hospital. Then early Sunday morning, he sent out 5 different text messages to co-workers using his wife's cell phone and his own. 4 times, he messaged the family's address, once texting, "The dogs are in the enclosed pool area, garage side door open." Neighbors say Benoit mostly kept to himself.
Shocked. I mean, you never dream anything like this would happen in your neighborhood, let alone across the street.
Benoit is the latest in a string of professional wrestlers to die prematurely or from unnatural causes, renewing questions about what goes on behind the scenes and whether pro wrestling's culture contributes to such tragedies. Police found no suicide note but did find anabolic steroids in the house.
What people don't talk about are the problems with psychological issues. The people that have the, quote, roid rage, end quote, are the problems with mood swings or depression.
In a statement, the WWE said it is entirely wrong for speculators to suggest that steroids had anything to do with these senseless acts. The WWE says Benoit tested negative for steroids in April. WWE Commissioner Vince McMahon said little about Benoit in introducing Tuesday night's wrestling fair on cable TV.
Tonight's show will be dedicated to everyone who has been affected by this terrible incident. This evening marks the first step of the healing process. Tonight, WWE performers will do what they do better than anyone else in the world: entertain you.
So while fans absorb another loss, pro wrestling is once again under a spotlight of scrutiny. For today, Ron Mott, NBC News, Atlanta.
What role steroids played in the Benoit murder-suicide? The tragedy has made clear both how pervasive roids are in wrestling and how easy it is to obtain them. Senior producer Craig Rivera spoke to crusading Albany County, New York District Attorney Daniel Soares about his nationwide investigation into the companies who peddled the poison on the internet to people just like Chris Benoit. He was stoic, loyal, and dependable. But when Chris Benoit's close friend Eddie Guerrero died 2 years ago, the wrestler known as the Canadian Cripple revealed his emotional frailty on a World Wrestling Entertainment broadcast.
I want to thank you from my heart and tell you that I love you and I'll never forget you. And I will see each other again. I love you, Eddie.
No one realized how soon Benoit's prediction would come true. Then last Saturday, June 23rd, he failed to show up for a big pay-per-view match in Texas. It was completely out of character for the muscle-bound man with a solid workout. At the time, Benoit told friends in the wrestling business that his wife and 7-year-old son were sick from food poisoning and were vomiting blood. But the former WWE champion sounded groggy, even unstable. The day before, Benoit had apparently bound, crushed, and strangled his wife Nancy, herself a former wrestling personality once known as Woman. And then later Saturday, Benoit allegedly choked the life out of his beautiful 7-year-old son Daniel, a boy inflicted with a form of retardation called Fragile X syndrome. He left a Bible near the child's lifeless form. When Benoit missed the WWE pay-per-view event the next day, fans learned he was experiencing a family emergency. This apparently led to the mysterious Wikipedia entry stating that Nancy Benoit had passed away. The news appears to have come from a fan, wildly speculating but correctly about events in the Benoit home. What makes the entry so unusual, though, is the fact that it was posted from Stamford, Connecticut, where WWE Chairman Vince McMahon runs his multi-million-dollar wrestling empire. By the time the pay-per-view ended Sunday night, Benoit had sent more text messages to fellow wrestlers, repeatedly listing his home address in Georgia. Concerned, those people contacted WWE management, who notified the local sheriff. Authorities finally entered the house on Monday to discover Benoit hanging from a pulley in his weight room. His just replenished stash of steroids and other prescription medication was found nearby.
We've been engaged in an investigation that has taken down one of the major distribution centers, a company called Signature Pharmaceutical Company in Orlando, Florida. And information that we've received, there were products sent from Signature Pharmaceutical Company to Mr. Benoit.
Do you know whether or not those products contain steroids or human growth hormones?
I cannot say at this point what was contained within those packages, but the people whose names have appeared on our list were in fact receiving human growth hormones and steroids.
From Signature. This is a company that makes how much per year?
This is a company that started out between $400,000 and $500,000 a year gross. That is now earning anywhere between $30 to $40 million. Well,
$30 to $40 million?
$million previous to our taking them down.
Looking at the Chris Benoit case, how easy is it for people to obtain these human growth hormones and steroids?
Well, one of the reasons we went after this case and went after this company as aggressively as we did is because the anonymity that is provided in the internet, how readily accessible these drugs and these harmful products were to people, so it was important for us to take them down.
Have these internet companies that you've investigated coerced doctors, paid off doctors in order to write scripts which look legitimate?
There are bidding wars that actually go on. Our undercover investigator who was posing as a physician on the internet, he was offered up to $7,000 per week just to write out prescriptions without ever lifting a finger or conducting a single solitary medical examination.
In a statement, the wrestling organization says, the physical findings announced by authorities indicate deliberation, not rage. WWE strongly suggests that it is entirely wrong for speculators to suggest that steroids had anything to do with these senseless acts. So, where do steroids stand in the bizarre Benoit deaths? With me now, senior investigative reporter for Sports Illustrated and SI.com, Luis Fernanda Loza. So, do you know something, Luis, about Benoit's purchases of steroids? What have you found out?
What I found out is that Mr. Benoit was purchasing from a pipeline that we've been investigating since last summer. That pipeline consists of people who go on the internet or by phone purchase from anti-aging clinics, human growth hormone and steroids, which are then shipped to them by compound pharmacies, which tend to work in collusion with these anti-aging clinics. And what we've...
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
What we found out is that basically, having heard what had happened, we got concerned and wondered whether Chris Benoit might be able to be linked to this pipeline that has been uncovered by the Albany County DA's office and the Bureau of Narcotic Enforcement in upstate New York, and by investigators in Florida, and also in an ancillary investigation in Alabama. And I checked with sources, and they confirmed that he received 3 packages from MedX Life, sent through the pharmacy, which was raided on February 27th by multiple agencies as part of this pipeline.
Now, do you know anything about an explanation for his behavior that would have some connection to his steroid use?
It's a very complicated question. I mean, what the term has been being thrown around everywhere is roid rage, and it's not that simple. He acted deliberately, and so it's tough to link what he did, this tragic series of events, to a specific cause and to the specific intake and abuse of steroids.
What about the WWE? Steve Austin's wife has said this incident shows that the WWE is out of control with steroid use and physical and emotional abuse in the households of these professional wrestlers.
Well, it's a sad state of affairs right now that they're backpedaling, and what they needed to do really is be much more proactive. They established a testing system on the heels of the death of Eddie Guerrero, who died of an enlarged heart and heart disease in 2005. But I think one would hope that they would figure out a way to have psychologists on hand and be proactive about trying to understand what's happening in the minds of their talent.
Luis Fernando Loza from Sports Illustrated. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Back to follow-up segment tonight. As you may know, pro wrestler Chris Benoit murdered his wife, 7-year-old son earlier this week in suburban Atlanta. Benoit then hanged himself. Now comes word that 14 hours before the bodies were discovered, there was a posting on Wikipedia announcing the death of Nancy Benoit. Just more bizarre stuff in this awful case. With this how to analyze, Fox News anchor Geraldo Rivera. And every day, this gets more and more bizarre.
I think that there is going to be increased scrutiny of WWE and what role they played in, I don't know about the facts and circumstances surrounding the death necessarily, but certainly in the steroid abuse of the people who are their actors in this entertainment that we see. It obviously combines great athleticism, but there's also heavy steroid use. They know about the heavy steroid use. Today there were raids on Benoit's doctor in the Atlanta area, raids on the internet pharmacy in Florida that also prescribed drugs to him and many others. So I think, and when you recall that WWE did everything it could in the immediate wake of this tragedy to downplay the possibility that there was roid rage and say, oh no, it was because the couple had been feuding over the care of their developmentally disabled 7-year-old son, Daniel. What a bunch of bunk that was. They were trying intentionally to deflect the public's attention from the steroid use. But now comes this mysterious Wikipedia posting at midnight on Sunday. Remember, the bodies are
legit, right?
We don't know. We don't know. It is legit that they received the posting. We don't know if it could have been by chance a hoax posting that he missed the PPV, he missed the pay-per-view.
Unbelievable coincidence.
It would be an unbelievable. But I'll tell you another coincidence. The authorities say that here is Chris Benoit. He kills his wife, Nancy, on Friday, June 15th, or Saturday, June 16th. Did you know that on Friday, June 15th, a woman named Sherry Martel also died of unnatural causes related to drug use? Who is Sherry Martel? She is another woman connected to this group of professional wrestlers. Indeed, the guy who was the original husband of Chris's wife, Nancy, the one he allegedly murdered, he was this other woman, Sherry Martel's booker and friend.
So they were all in
and she died the same day, Bill, June 15th, Friday, June 15th.
So they were all in the same industry, the wrestling industry.
The same industry. They all knew each other. They were all connected. It's one degree of
overdose?
They haven't said yet. They say it was not natural causes.
Right.
They don't suspect foul play. It means a drug overdose.
Now, when you have a situation like this, and Americans are locked into it, do you think this is going to damage the industry? Or do you think the authorities are going to go in and really go through it?
Well, I think that before you even get to whether or not they are covering up the steroid abuse, you have to find out if that email, which was posted from Stamford, Connecticut, which is where the headquarters of WWE is, was it posted by some official at WWE, or was it the hoax that some now say? If it was posted by someone at WWE, they were obviously in communication with Chris Benoit. It is alleged on that Sunday night, June 17th, Chris Benoit was IMing. He was instant messaging people, talking to his friends as he's watching the wrestling event that he was supposed to be at in Texas.
Right.
So here he's going like this. Did he send a text message to WWE, I killed my wife, or my wife just died? What did he say? Did Chris say? And who at WWE caught those messages? I think the feds have to subpoena every single electronic.
Is it a federal investigation now? Because the Atlanta authorities are handling a murder case.
Yes, and New York and DEA did the Florida drug raid, so the feds are already involved at a certain level. But I think this is going to be gigantic. This will affect WWE. We don't know if it's a double murder-suicide or it's something more insidious. Maybe it's a triple murder. Maybe it's a quadruple murder.
Well, if they can prove that steroid use was ordered by the top guys in the Wrestling Federation, they'll arrest them.
I don't know if you go that far. What if you can prove that everybody in town knows that everybody is doing whatever everybody is doing, steroid use coming out the gazoo, and do nothing? Now it's a little less clear as to their criminal liability, but I think you definitely have a story here that will affect professional wrestling.
Just like boxing went down at one point because of all the corruption and the fixes and all of that.
You're going to have indictments
in this case. All right. Well, Aldo Rivera, everybody, thank you, as always. Thank you. And watch them on the weekends at 8 o'clock.
In the ring, he was a champion, but Chris Benoit's professional success may have come at a heavy price. Authorities say the wrestler killed his wife and son before taking his own life. Now, a group who tested samples of Benoit's brain tissue suggests repeated concussions could have contributed to the killings.
An unremitting condition characterized by a progressive decline in cognitive and mental function. We think it's also caused by multiple concussive blows.
Benoit's father, Michael, joined the doctors at a press conference.
It was completely out of character for my son to do what he did. So, as the doctors say, we really don't have a full understanding of how the damage to the brain can cause people to act out of character.
Emory University neurologist Wendy Wright, who is not involved in the Benoit case, agreed that brain injuries can cause behavioral changes, but said those changes tend to manifest themselves over time, not all at once.
This isn't something that you would certainly expect to see turn on one day and have someone fly into a vicious rage, which is why one would suspect that there were a lot of contributing factors to what happened in this gentleman's life.
Michael Benoit said there were few clues as to his son's mental state in the weeks leading up to the June killings.
We didn't notice anything. Chris seemed quite normal to us. I spoke with him a week before this tragedy. He called me on Father's Day and said to me at the time, you know, Happy Father's Day.
Benoit said he knows his son had concussions because his son told him so. But he said he knows of no medical records or records kept by the Wrestling League to support the diagnosis. Meanwhile, the federal investigation into prescriptions written by Benoit's personal doctor continues. Jason Bronis, The Associated Press, Atlanta.